Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at Borderlands, Mr. Torgue's Arena of Badassery. Now I'm just going to call this Borderlands for short, as it will probably just make my life easier. Now this game is based on the Borderlands video game. I have played some of Borderlands 3 and I believe it's called the prequel, but I'm not deep into the lore of the game. But I was still intrigued how they could convert like a looter shooter video game, which tends to be fast action with loads of different guns and loot, into a slower paced board game. Now the board game is a campaign game. There's a scenario book for you to progress through, and in between you can level up your characters by buying more equipment, maybe going on a bounty hunt if you're able to get that token. Now the gameplay itself is kind of a miniatures fighting game where you take on the role of the 4 vault hunters from the video game and fight off waves of enemy until you've achieved the goal of that scenario. We've seen this type of game before. Now one of the things that this game does to try and set itself apart from the ones we've seen before is what they call the reaction system and kind of their activation tokens. Each vault hunter has 3 different colors. You can have green and yellow, which you start with, and you can get red when you get wounds. And you can use these to do an action with the strength or the die corresponding to that color. Green is the best and red is the worst. As you take damage, your tokens will move from green and yellow into red, and if you have all red tokens and take a wound, well then you're kind of out of the round. But you can be resuscitated in between rounds at the new U station. Now I enjoyed the video game, so I was looking forward to playing the board game. So will this just be a Badassery game, or will it just be, well, you know. Let's get it to the table, see what it's played, and I'll come back to my final thoughts on Borderlands, Mr. Torgue's Arena of Badassery.
So here's Borderlands set up. There's no way I can go through all the rules in this overview, so I'm just going to be covering the main elements of the game. The main hook of this game is the reaction system. Your characters have different colored action tokens. Generally, these will be flipped over to determine which die you will roll. These action tokens can also be used if you're attacked. You get a chance to react to whatever is hitting you to see if you can dodge or mitigate the attack, and I'll be talking about that later. Now here's the board setup. You'll always use 4 vault hunters regardless of the player count. Choose a scenario from the scenario book. Now this is just the introductory layout that I have here, and the scenario book will tell you what models to use, tokens, starting positions, win conditions, loss conditions, any boss event cards, etc. Place everything is directed in the scenario book. Each player chooses 1 skill tree card from the 3 that go with their vault hunter. You can upgrade your vault hunter during the scenario if you find loot, or upgrade your skills in between scenarios. Shuffle all the fan favorite cards and deal out 1 to each vault hunter. These will show you when you get the spotlight token. These are going to be important when the enemies choose which person to go after. They're going to go after the person who currently has the spotlight. The group will have a communal starting cache as outlined in the scenario. Cache is used to respawn during the game or purchase upgrades between scenarios. All the vault hunters are placed in the zone with the green New U station. Next, take the announcement cards, and for this introductory scenario, we're only using Tier 1 announcements and deal out as many as specified in the scenario, and place the Tier 0 card at the end. The Tier 0 card is always used for all scenarios. These announcement cards determine what the enemies do. If you ever get to the Tier 0 card, Mr. Torgue has lost his patience and that card will be repeated until the scenario is over. Place all of the loot tokens in the claptrap bag and shuffle all the gear and event decks. At a very high level, a round will go as follows. Players will activate a Vault Hunter and use all their actions, or they could pass and keep some of those activation tokens non-exhausted, and continue until all Vault Hunters have been activated. Then it's the enemy's turn. The enemies will follow the current announcement card queue from top to bottom in that order. Once both sides have had their turn, there is a cleanup phase. Let's have a quick look at a Vault Hunter card. It will show you the actions it has to start. There might also be some starting equipment. They're also going to have some skills. When they attempt to do one of these skills, they add that skill value to whatever die they roll. Many Vault Hunters also have a special or action which is outlined on their card. Now the bulk of the game will be performing actions. When you perform an action, you first flip over one of your Vault Hunter's action tokens. Then you will check to see if there's a skill action, and if there is that skill, you will then check its range. Range is measured in zones. Red, which is the space the model is in, plus the next hex. Yellow is 2 hexes away, and green is 3 hexes away. After choosing an action and exhausting any required action tokens, you choose a target and check if it's in range and if you have line of sight to it. Then determine the target number. If attacking an enemy, the target number will be their defense roll. Roll the die that matches the exhausted action token and add any related skill value or any modifiers. If your roll is equal to or higher than the target number, it's successful. Then you're going to apply whatever effects it is. Some actions have a successful effect or a failure effect. Each die also has a crit and a fumble on it. If you roll a crit, it's an automatic success, and a fumble is an automatic failure. If you're ever attempting a skill which the Vault Hunter does not have, you still exhaust an action token and roll the matching die, but you do not add anything to that roll. And some actions are easy actions, which will automatically succeed but still require an action token, and some actions are free actions, which do not require an activation token. When the Vault Hunters are activated, there are 6 basic actions they can do. Whenever you do one of these, you exhaust an action token. You can move up to the number of zones that matches the exhausted action token. 1 if red, 2 if yellow, 3 if green. You can melee attack an enemy within the red zone, so the same hex or adjacent. This will do a single wound if successful and follows the example I gave before. You can swap guns. This is an easy action, requires a token, but no roll. There's also an interact action. This is usually defined by the scenario. For example, you might be able to pick up an explosive. For an action, you can also trade loot tokens from one Vault Hunter to another as long as they're in the same hex. And the last action is the collect action, which is a free and easy action and can be done multiple times during your turn. Each time a Vault Hunter enters a new hex, they can take the collect action to pick up any loot tokens and place them on their card. Now once all the Vault Hunters have been activated, it's now the enemy's turn. They're going to follow the current announcement card, start from the top of the card, and perform each line in the announcement card. Whenever the enemies target a hunter, it's always going to be the one who has the spotlight on them as long as they're within range. Each enemy type will have a card that shows their stats. How far they move, their defense, hit points. What they do when the current announcement says special, a resist state, that is the skill the hunters need to resist this model's attack. It will list their current attack range, strength, which is what they need to hit a Vault Hunter, and what happens when a Vault Hunter rolls a fumble against them, and any special abilities that this model has. I need now to talk about the core concept of this game, and that's those tokens, defending, wounds, and reactions. When an enemy attacks a Vault Hunter, let's say this psycho is punching this Vault Hunter, you first determine the target number. That is the strength of the attacker plus any modifiers that they have. The attacked hunter must determine which of their tokens they want to defend with. It doesn't matter if it's already been activated or exhausted. Roll the die that matches that activation token and add any modifiers. If the hunter fails to defend, you replace the used green or yellow token with a red token in the same status, either exhausted or non-exhausted. If the hunter fails a roll with a red token, the Vault Hunter is taken out and can respawn during the cleanup phase. If, during the Vault Hunter's actions, they picked up healing loot, and they are wounded, that is one of their activation tokens is being traded for a red one, they can replace the red activation token with the original token by discarding that healing loot. Now, if any Vault Hunter takes a wound, the reaction system kicks in. Any Vault Hunter who still has a non-exhausted activation token and is in line of sight of the wounded hunter, including the just wounded hunter themselves, they can take a normal action by exhausting their token. Hunters can only react if another hunter or themselves was wounded. If the enemy attack fails, no reaction can take place. Once hunters and enemies have taken their actions, we go to the cleanup phase. Roll a die to see if the loot stays on the board. If a Vault Hunter was taken out during the round, they can respawn for 500 in cash tokens and be placed back in the new U zone. Check for victory or defeat. Some scenarios will have specific conditions, but as a default, if a Vault Hunter is taken out during the round and cannot respawn during this phase, that is, you don't have enough money, then it's a defeat for the players. If this scenario continues, exhaust the current announcement card, but never flip over the final one. This will keep reoccurring until the scenario is complete. And finally, refresh all exhausted action tokens. Now, in between scenarios, Vault Hunters can use the loot that they have accumulated during the round to go to the vending machines to purchase additional guns, ammos, meds, and something from Mr. Torque himself. Draw 2 cards from the first 3 and 1 from the Torque deck. These are the options available to purchase by any of the players, and they're allowed to trade, they're allowed to use the communal money, they can sell some of the gear, and basically pool their money to purchase whatever they need. Some scenarios also allow you to level up hunters after victory, so you can do that now as well by placing the appropriate tokens on your skill tree card. The announcement deck does get harder as you progress through the campaign. It's always 12 cards, and at the beginning of the campaign, it is all Tier 1 cards. In between scenarios, you remove 4 of the lowest tier and replace them with the next higher tier cards. If the hunters end a scenario with a bounty token, in between scenarios, they can go on a bounty hunt. It works pretty much the same as this scenario. It is shortened to only 2 announcement cards, and you roll a die to see which bounty you go on. Now, there are many more small rules that I haven't gone through, but hopefully I've given you enough to understand how the game works. So let's get back to see what I thought about Borderlands Mr. Torque's Arena of Badassery.
Let's start off with theme and components. Now, I enjoyed the theme, and yes, it probably does help to have played the video game or at least be familiar with it, maybe seen the movie, you're going to be looking at those characters and some of the components and just get it. You'll get the kind of joke for it. Now, if you don't know the IP, you'll be looking at, you'll be looking at this loot bag and wondering, why is there a robot on it? And why is the robot called Claptrap? Now, I thought the theme was well done throughout the game, from the rulebook to the components to the little things before the scenarios, and the overall feel of the game. For people that I played it with, though, they didn't have the background and were a little lost. Now, the theme is just kind of superficial covering to the game. I wouldn't say it takes away from the gameplay if you don't know it, but it definitely, if you do know the theme, this one's probably going to appeal more to you. For the components, I do have some issues. First is this rulebook. It's not a good rulebook. And the thing is, I'm not sure how to make it better. Now, if you saw my rules overview, it does kind of jump around a bit, but I'm not sure how to fix it. There are just a lot of upfront rules that don't seem to have a logical order in which way to explain them. You kind of need to know it all at once. But then trying to look up a rule when you come to a situation is tough. And honestly, why is the incomplete component list at the back of the scenario book and not with the rule book? I'm not sure. Now, definitely, if you're going to play this game, there is an unofficial FAQ that will definitely gives you some help for this. For the components themselves, now I only have the core box with the 4 default hunters. But I thought the models were decent. This is one of the sidekicks. I do wish that there were several more, as there are times there's just not enough models. I do like the hero models and the sidekicks and the larger enemy models. Now, the small ones do start to look a little nondescript, as there are so many different types of enemy cards. And here's the models that you go with all these. And I would also say there's just so many little bits of cardboard they're going to be using. Again, they're all, hopefully most of them are going to be referenced. That is just a little bit overwhelming from the number of components, but that's a good thing. Now, onto the gameplay. And this is where things get a little tricky. And I want to stress that I'm only looking at the base box, and some of my concerns will be alleviated maybe with some expansions. There are some things I like about this game, and honestly some things I just don't like about this game. The reaction system with the activation tokens is probably by far the best part of the game for me. Keeping the token unactivated so you can use it when someone or if you gets attacked and wounded is an interesting mechanism. And having that green, yellow, and red tokens, having different strengths, mean you do a fair bit of planning. And this is probably my favorite part of the game. Tactically figuring out how to best use my abilities and tokens for the Vault Hunter I'm currently playing. Then discussing the plan with other players to come up with okay, well, I'm going to go over here using a yellow token. I'm going to use my green token to maybe shoot this group of psychos over here. But I'm going to keep my yellow token one unused, so maybe you can run over here and I can cover you if you get wounded. But that does get hampered by what I felt to be the monotonous execution of the gameplay. I enjoyed the player's turns for the most part, but the enemy turns I just found uninteresting and too long. You move through the card and activated all the enemies. And sometimes when you have a board full of characters, they attack, which means for every Vault Hunter that they hit, there's a roll-off. And then there's a reaction if there's a hit and the roll for that. Then you do it again and again and again, and I just didn't find that fun. There were some games that we just gave up, not because we were losing, but because we just couldn't be bothered to go through all the enemies and all the rolls and all their activations. I want to be able to just move a group of people and go, foomp, they're in your square, they hit you, no, I have to roll for every one. I also found the game to be extremely lucky, and I think that's what they were going for. The scenarios didn't seem to be balanced. It came down to more of the luck of the die roll than the expert way you played. Now, you will get better at it, and it will become easier. Especially as you go through the scenarios, you get better at planning, and you level up, things get a little easier. The first few times we played, we really struggled in the first couple scenarios and didn't feel like continuing, because we actually stopped for a while. Next time we came back to it, we restarted and just kind of flew through the same first scenarios. Were we much better at planning, or were the dice rolls just luckier? So I am stuck. I read the rulebook and played the tactical part of the game, and I enjoyed that piece. Using my special abilities, calling in my sidekicks, upgrading my guns, doing a heroic run to maybe pick up a bomb, pulling some loot from the bag, which is always fun, and maybe sacrificing myself to take out a few enemies knowing that we have enough money to respawn me in between rounds. That's fun. When it's not the player's turn, I didn't find that fun. And I know that there has to be an enemy's turn, but the game just seems to grind to a halt on their turn. It lost me out of the game. And I know this might just be me, and maybe it's my group thing, and maybe you might enjoy that piece more than I did, but it's just the thing that stops me from wanting to get this game back to the table. So would I recommend this game? If you are a Borderlands fan and are looking for something slightly chaotic and sometimes frustrating, a tactical scenario-based game, you'll probably want to give this one a go. But for the rest, I might suggest kind of skipping it and staying away. Now, I did like the theme in this one. Knowing the IP definitely helps. I thought the reaction system with the different color tokens a really interesting implementation. The planning and execution of the player side was by far the most enjoyable part of the game. I like the variability of the setups and the scenarios, and I especially like the fail forward mentality. If you failed a mission, you still got to continue, maybe down a slightly different path, maybe you didn't get an upgrade, but you could still continue, so you didn't have to play the same scenario over and over and over again. But ultimately, I found the entire game just too random, too unbalanced because of the luck, too fiddly, and too much of a slog to really enjoy it. I found as the scenario we were playing on went on, and we weren't lucky enough to eliminate the enemies early on, it just became a chore to play their side. Or we got lucky enough to eliminate a bunch of enemies early on, and the scenarios were then just kind of too easy. I want a middle ground, where I'm as invested in the player's turn as I am in the enemy turns, and those enemy turns go quickly and smoothly. So my final score is going to be a 6.5 out of 10, and that's really a combination of the 7 to 7.5 for the player's turns, which I found enjoyable, and like a 5 to 5.5 for the enemy's turn and the randomness or the luck-driven outcomes. And because of that, I can't say this one's going to be coming back to the table anytime soon. But honestly, maybe if there's a second edition and they tweak things, yeah, it could draw me back. But that's it for now. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey folks, thanks for joining us for that video. If you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hey, make sure you check out what's happening, where I'll cover an app on an iOS or a Switch device, and you can check it out along with me. Thanks very much. You've been watching The Dice Tower.